audience seems divided over this little device, the mClassic from Marseille, a HDMI dongle that provides upscaling and graphics post-processing on many a video signal that's run through it. It's been touted as being like having a new graphics card upgrade, but on your existing console, and it's said to improve the picture of earlier video game systems. However, people have been reporting that they're either not seeing a difference at all, or it's making their games look worse. Well, since there's a lot of conflicting information about this, I decided to pick one up for myself to find out, once and for all, whether it's worth it. So, hello fellow gamers, and is the mClassic everything it claims to be? Or is it just a scam? Now, for the benefit of anyone who doesn't know, the mClassic is a graphics preprocessor, meaning it will make changes to the picture after the console has spat it out. You plug it into your console via the HDMI port and it makes various adjustments to the colour and the contrast, as well as applying anti-aliasing effects across the screen to smooth out any sharp edges. It will also upscale the picture. Lower resolutions like 480p and 720p are bumped all the way up to 1080p, and even 1440 if your TV supports it. Now, all of that together, it promises will improve the quality of the image being shown on your telly. You can choose to have them applied or not by using the switch on the side of the mClassic, which offers 3 different settings: pass-through, enabled, and retro mode, which forces a 4:3 output. Well, that all sounds well and good, but what's it actually like in practice? Well, Marseille themselves have given us a good starting point. Their own marketing seems to focus a lot on how this can turn your Switch into a quote-unquote Switch Pro with the enhancements it offers. So let's check out what it can do with my Switch on my 1080p TV. The first game we're trying here is Super Mario Odyssey. This normally outputs at 900p when the Switch is docked, and with the mClassic enabled, we do get a 1080p picture out of it. But as it's only been knocked up by a little bit, we're not really seeing much of a benefit there. When comparing the before and after footage zoomed in, we can see that the sharp edges are being smoothed out a bit, leaving the game with a bit of a cleaner picture. But these changes, they weren't really noticeable on the screen. The fact that we had to really zoom in and compare before seeing anything that's changed means that the effect the mClassic is applying here, it's very subtle at best. Now, I'm probably not being fair to it, testing it with Super Mario Odyssey, which is already a beautifully detailed game. We're likely to see more dramatic changes if we use a game that runs at an even lower resolution. Doom 2016 should fit the bill nicely here, as that only outputs at 720p, and since it uses a dynamic resolution, it can even drop to below 540p under load. Sadly, when running through the first part of this game, I was sorely disappointed. Under a magnifying glass, you can see the contrast levels have been altered and there's a slight softening of the textures, but to be honest, I struggled to see any difference whatsoever during normal gameplay. There were never any wow moments, and it's certainly not like having a new graphics card, like Marseille's marketing would want us to believe. So after testing a couple of Switch games with drastically different docked resolutions, I think we can make one conclusion so far. The mClassic does not turn your Switch into a Switch Pro, at least when using a 1080p TV. You might have better luck with a 4K TV, but you'd think we'd see at least something significant when testing this with Doom without having to do any side-by-side comparisons. I thought then I'd try it out on something a bit simpler. The 2D sprite work on the likes of the Mega Drive Mini and the SNES Classic should help highlight some of the changes the mClassic is making, right? Well, firing up Sonic with the mClassic enabled, we can see a few differences, albeit not all for the better. Under scrutiny, the gradients and the colours do look better, some of the colours are a little more pronounced, and there's a noticeable sharpness to everything. However, that sharpening filter the mClassic is applying results in a faint ringing artifact around, well, everything, like if you cranked up the sharpness on your telly. We get similar results on other sprite-based games too. Super Mario World suffers the same as Sonic, with ringing artifacts everywhere. It gets worse if we go back to using the original consoles. Ordinarily, I would be using an OSSC to get a better picture out of my earlier consoles, but the mClassic really doesn't like it. I get this distorted image whenever I try to use any line doubling, and ultimately, I have to set my OSSC to pass-through before it will work. And when we do that, the mClassic is working more or less with the Mega Drive's raw 313p image. Adding any sort of anti-aliasing on an already soft image results in that weird soft filter effect that, for some reason, companies keep putting in their re-releases for older titles. I'm looking at you, Microids. The OSSC glitchiness isn't restricted to SCART games either. It also happens with line-doubled VGA games too, so the line doubling has to be turned off on the OSSC completely in order for it to work, at least from my experience. Now I've got to admit, the Dreamcast picture through the mClassic, it looks pretty good. The edges are smoothed out really nicely here, but I'm not liking how the colours were changed. It would be nice to have the option to switch these individual effects on and off. So, the mClassic's effects were pretty much unnoticeable on a Switch, and it was way too heavy-handed with 2D sprites on 16-bit machines. With these two extremes, the mClassic certainly hasn't lived up to its hype. But it is definitely doing something, that much is clear, so maybe there's a nice middle ground where the mClassic could shine. Let's go back to only a couple of generations ago this time, with the PS3 and Gran Turismo 6. Now GT6 does support 1080p, but I've scaled the PS3's output down to 720, so we can see what kind of effect we could get here. And yes, I could have just used a 720p game, but GT6's replay feature gives us something consistent to compare against. And you know what? It actually looks pretty good. I can see the sharp, jagged edges of the cars are smoothed out nicely here, and the colours are more on point too. The effect hasn't been too strong on the environments either, highlighting the shadows a little and adding a little sharpness to bring out some of the detail. Even cars in the distance appear clearer and more detailed. This time I didn't even have to wait for a side-to-side comparison, the improvements were instantly noticeable. Overall, it was definitely more appealing, and if the mClassic can pull this off more consistently, I'd be sold. Unfortunately, I couldn't say the same when I tested Fallout New Vegas on the 360. Other than a slight brightness increase, there wasn't any discernible difference after plugging the mClassic in. So even with the 7th generation of consoles, the results are a bit hit and miss. But hey, at least we've seen proof now of what the mClassic is capable of. There's one part of the mClassic we haven't explored yet, and that's its retro mode option. This applies all of the same bells and whistles the mClassic offers, but it forces the image into a 4:3 aspect ratio, which is rather handy sometimes. So as the results on the 7th gen consoles were a little hit and miss, let's make use of the retro mode on the 6th gen consoles instead. Like we did for the PS3, we're going to test the PS2 and the mClassic with a Gran Turismo replay, this time with GT4. Sadly though, the results weren't as impressive as they were in the PS3. Comparing the replay with the mClassic on and off, there doesn't appear to be any discernible differences between the two. And it's the same story with Halo 2 on the original Xbox, with the mClassic offering absolutely nothing different to the overall picture. There was a very different result with the GameCube though. As you can see on this intro to Twilight Princess, the colours are boosted, many of the sharp edges have been smoothed out, and a little more detail can be made out. Even simply looking at this still of Link riding Epona, the differences are very noticeable, and, well, in my opinion, very welcome. And it wasn't just Twilight Princess either. I threw F-Zero GX at it, I threw Pokemon XD at it, and Smash Brothers. Every game looked better than before. Now, I couldn't say for certain why the mClassic is excelling with the GameCube over the other consoles, but I do wonder if it's down to the setup I have for it. It's using a HDMI adapter plugged into the console's digital output, and it has Swiss forcing a 480p output. The result from the GameCube with this setup has always been impressive, but adding the mClassic into the mix really elevates it. I think we may have found the mClassic's niche. So, going back to that original question, is the mClassic everything it claims to be, or is it just a complete scam? Well, it's neither of them. After testing this out with various different systems with different resolutions and outputs, I can only conclude that the mClassic is really best suited for straight up 480p content. Anything lower than that and it will be too blurry, and anything higher than that is going to get you mixed results. Coupling it with the GameCube really did make the games look better. They had more colour, there was more detail, there were less jaggies, and it was a noticeable improvement, one that I could see instantly, rather than one that can only be found under a microscope. So, the mClassic. It's not everything it claims to be, but it's really damn good at 480p content. And maybe the odd 720p content as well. But with that, I'm going to sign off, so thanks very much for watching. Have you considered an mClassic? Did you get one? And if you did, what have been your experiences with it? Let everyone know down below in the comments. And hey, while you're down there, please leave a like if you like the video, and you know, there's always that subscribe button if you want to hear more from me. Thanks again, I'll catch you all next time.